Hello, this is the Math Mini Unit by Emily Torgerson. For the unit overview, I selected grade 3. Right now I teach a 4th, 5th, and 6th SDC class, so a lot of my students are approaching that 2nd, 3rd grade level for math, so this is really relevant for where they're at. I decided to do an introduction to multiplication. I chose this concept as my students have recently mastered adding and subtracting with regrouping, and we will be focusing on building the foundation for multiplication by working with equal groups of objects and also talking about odd and even numbers. The most important idea that I wanted my students to conceptualize is that multiplication is similar to repeated addition, and you can use arrays and visuals to support that. So on the left of the screen, you will see a puzzle that the students completed for one of the lessons, where they are combining ideas of repeated multiplication with arrays and addition as well. The students in the lessons will be able to use manipulatives, art, reading comprehension, flexible pairs and groups of instruction to facilitate their learning. The unit objectives. Students will be able to solve one-step multiplication problems using concrete objects, pictorial representations, and arrays, determine whether a group of objects has an odd or even number of units, interpret those products using the arrays, and then using that information to create a word problem using multiplication and division. This time we only focused on multiplication, and then reading carefully to determine if the information is necessary and eliminating any extra information. So on our right, we have 3 different visuals symbolizing the same product. And this is something that students can use whatever visual they want to represent. So we were using Legos, cubes, dice, paint, whatever the individuals preferred. Here are the California Common Core state standards. I also incorporated state standards pertaining to reading, writing, and art, as you will see later. And the design process. For lesson 1, the most important thing was to connect to their prior language, prior knowledge. So we began by reading a story or 2 different stories about odd and even numbers. The students then turned to their peer for a think, pair, share activity where they were discussing what they learned in the stories, pairing it with ideas in the classroom, and then sharing it out loud. Then they were using manipulatives with their dice, cubes, and place value bats to show their demonstration of understanding of what an odd and even group would be. The importance of using the think, pair, share was to give the educator more of an idea of where the students were at a quicker pace so that I wasn't having to go around to each individual student to check for understanding. For lesson 2, we were expanding on their knowledge of multiplication using games to increase their engagement and promoting the academic language. They also were using independent practice at the end of the lesson so that I was able to gather their exit tickets to inform instruction, which was helpful with the pacing of the lessons. For the games, the students were working together in groups, working on an array puzzle. So they were cutting, pasting, gluing, working with groups if they wanted to, and they have different ways to assess if they were understanding that multiplication and addition were similar. For lesson 3, we were integrating art into the lesson to elaborate on an imaginative idea. They also were using technology, so at the end you will see a screen grab from a website where students were playing an interactive game that focused on multiplication using the arrays. This was a UDL strategy that incorporated using multiple uses of media and expression. This was really important in the design process because many of my special education students required different ways to access the curriculum. So by using art, by using technology, using written responses, group pairing, and oral presentations, all different learners were able to express their understanding. And then lesson 4, this is when we integrated the writing to examine a topic and convey ideas and information clearly. So we started this lesson based off of a book, and the students got information from the book to continue their own word problem, which they then used to create a poster. The students were then sharing their posters out loud to the group and providing feedback to each other. Having a Socratic discussion allowed me to assess where the students were at with their vocabulary, any ideas that students may have missed, and also to help form their ability to give feedback to another student and to accept feedback as well. At the end of lesson 4 is when we did our unit assessment with the Google form as well. Some of the successes and challenges, I found it was very successful using the reading comprehension, art, and STEAM activities. I thought this would be a little bit harder, but by expanding some of the targets, it was actually really easy to find other resources to help convey different ideas for math. The art as well was another fun activity for the students where they were learning without realizing they were learning because they were having so much fun using all of the paints and the dot art and working together and being able to talk and move around. I also found that it wasn't too difficult to scaffold for unique learners. I used a lot of small groups and utilized paraprofessionals to help students that were challenged, and then also having extra work and ideas for students who were mastering that. It was difficult to find how to pace and monitor the progress for the students. I found that some lessons needed to go back to revisit and others were understood very quickly. So the pacing was more difficult, and in the future I would probably integrate more assessments at the end of the day before the students left to see what they learned and anything they felt uncomfortable with. And here are some of the resources that we used. The students read My Even Day, One Odd Day, and another story called Each Orange Had 8 Slices. And on the right is a screen grab from the website on scoodle.edu for learning multiple